Hello all my beautiful sisters from those other misters, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you guys how I put together a prop box and the 6-week progress on root growth. Now if you're not familiar with what a prop box is, welcome to the planty world. This is essentially a system for rooting plant cuttings quickly and effectively. So the tools you're going to need are a tub, preferably as clear as you can find. You're going to need a drill, you're going to need some little baby nursery pots and some perlite. And obviously, you're going to need some plant cuttings. So first things first, I'm going to put some holes in this prop box. Now, I like to use a drill. There are plenty of ways to skin a cat though. So, however you want to get the holes in your prop box, you go ahead and do it that way. I just have a drill. I like to use a drill. I find it to be the easiest method. I would recommend to not use too much pressure when you are doing this because you can crack the lid or the box, and if you crack it too often and in too many of the wrong spots, you're going to end up with a gaping hole in your box, which you want to avoid. Now the reason why you should put holes in your prop box is for airflow. You don't necessarily have to have the holes, but then you really need to be opening your box every day to allow for airflow. So I put a whole bunch in the top and I put some in the sides of the tub as well. Don't put the holes too far down because you are going to eventually put some water in this tub and you don't want the water to leak out, obviously. The next thing that I do is label my little nursery pots. Now, I'm just using painter's tape here. You can use masking tape, washi tape, whatever you want. And I put that on the pots and I label them with the plant name and the date of when I potted them up and put them in the prop box. Now, the reason why I do this is because it's not unusual for propagations to drop their leaves, and it can be very difficult to tell what a plant is when it has no leaves. And if you've got multiple plants in the box, you might have to wait for them to completely grow out before you can identify them. And even then, sometimes it can be quite difficult to identify a plant when it's juvenile. I like to put the date on my pots as well because it helps me to know how quickly the plant has grown. So if I check the roots, 6 weeks after and they're really long, then I know that, hey, maybe it might only take 3 or 4 weeks to get a good root system going. But some plants take a hell of a lot longer, and especially when I'm propagating plants for the first time, I find this particular method, dating them, to be great for learning how long it takes for plants to root. And the next step is to pot up your cuttings. Now, I'm using perlite, and that means I'm going to wear a mask because perlite has a fine dust and that dust can be very dangerous. You should not inhale it. Wear a mask, like seriously, wear a mask. You can also wet the perlite to prevent the dust from, kicking up, but I find the perlite is actually a lot more difficult to work with when it's wet. So I just wear a mask. Another thing that I like to do is fill up some of my pots with perlite before I even put plants in them. And that is simply because it's really easy to then take some empty pots, put your cuttings in them, and then just tip the perfect amount of perlite into the pot. At the time of filming this, I was very low on my little baby nursery pots. We were in lockdown. It was difficult for me to get more. And also, you might be able to tell by the state of some of my cuttings that these had been sitting around for quite some time and they were desperate to be potted up. I really had put this off a lot longer than I should. It is recommended that when you take a cutting that you let it sit and callus for at least a couple of hours. I usually do overnight, so that it has a lesser chance of rotting the stem. These guys sat for many nights though, so don't do that. So you'll be able to see here that I'm putting multiple cuttings in one of the little nursery pots, and then I'm just filling them up with perlite. I give them a good tap so that the perlite kind of settles in there. I like to pot cuttings up in the way that I'm going to pot them into soil. So for example, the Snow Queen cuttings, they are destined to go back into my mother plant just to make it more full. And I'm happy for 3 or 4 of them to be potted up together because that is how they will be planted. Some of the other cuttings that I have here, the long leaf ones that you saw me potting up before, they are Monstera Standleyana. The thing that looked like it was dying and on its last legs was a dormant Alocasia zebrina. I found this plant interesting over winter because one of them that I have, kept going, and it went dormant, but it still maintained its leaves. It just stopped growing, which is not uncommon. And that one dropped all of its leaves and pretty much just gave up on life. So I opted to put it into the prop box just to see how quickly I could get it to come back. I also have a heartleaf philodendron, which it was just one really, really long strand. So I chopped it up and I want to fill out that pot. This one here is my philodendron melanochrysum. Listen, look, I have done this plant dirty. I didn't stake it, which means it kind of grew a bit leggy and sad. They love to climb. If you can let them climb, they will reward you. I didn't let it climb and it didn't reward me. So I had to chop it up to fix that. And then I'm an idiot and I left the cuttings for too long, so it's my own fault. I also have a Peperomia amigo Marcello. I only cut this because it was overgrown and I have no desire to have a backup of this plant or fill out the pot. The pot is full enough as it is, but I figured I would just propagate them, see how they propagate, because I've never propagated this plant before, and offer them to friends. And this purple one, I only know it as a purple passion. Look, it's not really a plant that I wanted to propagate, but the one that I have, I got it free with an order and it was overgrowing, and I thought, look, let's propagate it, see what it's like. If it grows, I'll offer it to friends. If not, no biggie. Once they're all potted up, the next thing I do is get some water in the bottom of that tub, and I actually hose them down when I'm first potting them up. The reason why I do that is it gets any dust or dirt off the leaves, and it also gets into the top of that perlite and gets it all nice and wet. I usually like to have about 1 centimeter or just a little bit less than 1 centimeter of water in the bottom of the tub, and that will just wick up the perlite over time and slowly water the plants without actually having them sitting in a pool of water. The final step is to give your cuttings light and heat. Now, if you live in a warm climate, you wouldn't need a heat mat, but if you live in a colder climate or it's winter or autumn, then I would highly recommend a heat mat. The one that I am putting this box on is from, I think it's Mr. Fothergrills or Fothergills, I don't know. I got it from Bunnings. I actually wouldn't recommend them. You can probably see that it's a hard plastic and they're not flat, which is really irritating. I have to balance this out with paper and oh my god, just no. On the left hand side, I do have a heat mat that is more flexible. It sits perfectly flat. They're bigger. They're fantastic. I'll link them both in the description box if you want to take a closer look. Now, your cuttings are also going to need light. Obviously, plants photosynthesize, they need light. I'm using artificial light, which works. You can also simply put them in a bright room, maybe on a windowsill. If you've got a window that gets direct morning sun, that would be absolutely perfect. My lights are full spectrum and they are pink, which, look, the pink bit, I don't really like it, but it is what it is and they work. Now, here is my box 1 week later. I always check on the box after a week, and I pull out any leaf litter that has fallen, any bits that are rotting. also, this is a really important step because some of the cuttings will somehow, I don't know how, it's like they grow legs and decide to go for a walk, but they will come out of the perlite. Now, this one here, you can see the Monstera stanleyana, one of the leaf stems had rotted, but the stem itself, or the stem of the plant where it's going to grow roots and potentially more leaves, that was fine. But you definitely want to remove anything that is showing signs of rot, because rot can spread. And this is why I always do this a week after setting up a prop box. Now, I will say perlite is a little bit more fussy when you have to do stuff like this. It's kind of annoying. However, I prefer it over sphagnum moss because I find if I leave a cutting in sphagnum moss for a little bit too long and the roots just kind of go mad, which isn't a problem. You can totally do that. Plants can grow in sphagnum moss for years and years. They can grow in perlite for years and years. But what I find is if you've got multiple plants in a sphagnum moss propagation box, the roots can get tangled, and when you do want to pot them up, it can be very difficult to separate them without damaging the root system. So you can see I'm just tidying up some of these cuttings, getting rid of anything that doesn't look healthy, resituating anything where the node is not covered by the perlite. And here is a snow queen that is fully rooted. I can pick it up by the leaf and it fully supports itself. It is growing aerial roots. I did pull out this little chunk that has not rooted but is starting to grow a leaf node. So, they're growing. The snow queen loves the perlite method. So this here is the Alocasia zebrina, which, it doesn't look like it's doing so good, guys. It has started to rot. It's lost the little bit of stem that was left on it, which I'm not surprised about. I was expecting that. I am actually giving this a really good cut. I am cutting a good chunk off this chunk, and I am hoping for the best. I would recommend, if you were to use this method and you found some rot in some of your cuttings, to do a peroxide bath. And that's just where you use diluted peroxide to give them a clean, and it helps to kill off the bacteria that's causing rot. Unfortunately, I did not have any and I could not get any at the time, so I just took a gamble. I was like, look, let's just see how this goes. I did lose some cuttings, some of the philodendron melanochrysum cuttings, not doing so well. I'm thinking in the future I will try a different propagation method with those. Once I went through all of the cuttings, I cleaned out the tub. You might be able to see that the water is looking a little bit green. That is algae, and that is extremely normal for a situation like this. You've got amazing conditions for plants to grow, super high humidity, beautiful warmth. Algae is going to grow. It's going to grow. It's not dangerous to your plants unless, you never, ever clean it away, which I wouldn't recommend. Expect to see it if you use this method, and make sure you clean out your prop box. So once the tub is all nice and clean, I start to put my cuttings back in there, and this is the time where I feed them. Now, when I first watered them, I just used straight up water, but now these plants are starting to grow roots, and because this is a semi-hydro setup, they are basically living in water and a substrate that offers no nutrition. So they need nutrition. There's no dirt, there's no, nutrients in there that is going to feed them, but they still need it. So I am using a semi-hydro plant food to feed these guys. Because they're itty bitty baby cuttings, I just use like a half strength of what I usually would for an established plant, and that means they're not going to freak out when I feed them. So how a semi-hydro system works is you use a substrate that can wick up and hold water, but not too much. So your plants are never sitting in like a pool of water, but they always have water available. Now, you might see substrates like I'm using here. Perlite is very, very common. Mabgrow or Lacusa pon, leca, stuff like that. And basically what you do is you let the plant sit in a little bit of water. Usually it's a quarter to a third the height of the substrate, not the pot, the substrate inside the pot. And what it does is it wicks the water up to the plant, so the plant can get the water that it needs without sitting in a pool of water. So the lid goes back on and the plant goes back into its spot. Every now and then I will open the lid just to let the plants breathe and air it out, but I don't do that very often. And here we have the 6-week grow result. So the one that I am most curious about is that little Alocasia zebrina chonk that was rotting. It has grown 2 nodes off the chonk. And it is fully rooted. To get it out of there, I have to remove it from the pot. It is not going to just slip out. The chonk does look very black and like it's rotted, but she's firm. It's just calloused over, and that is basically, that is what it is. That's what they do sometimes. But yeah, that plant is now growing 2 plants off it. This philodendron melanochrysum is growing some serious aerial roots, which they will do, especially in high humidity situations. I'm struggling with some plants there. I can't get them out because the roots have grown so much and they've tangled together. So it is a good idea to, check your plants and make sure that they're not rooting too much. Those melanochrysums that I was playing with there are looking a bit sad. I don't think they made it. I've got some... Oh, Mum's moving my camera. Uh-oh, spaghetti out. Mum! Okay, back to the cuttings. So the Monstera stanleyanas actually haven't rooted much, but it shouldn't surprise me. I've seen this happen before. They are all starting to grow a second leaf. Now, this is not really that uncommon. Some plants will prioritize growing leaves over roots, and that just means that they need more time to grow roots. Oh, you can see one there has really given up on life, and the tip cutting has just been growing. It is growing aerial roots. It has grown roots into the pot. It is too big. It can't even stand up. The root system on that Snow Queen, is anyone surprised by that? It was rooted after a week, so no, we're not surprised. The heartleaf philodendron also fully rooted, ready to be potted up. The purple passion has, that is a plant in itself now, and that is also fully ready to be potted up, and it's growing roots into another pot, so that's what they do. I am trying to separate more root growth. That is oh gosh, this is maybe check your prop boxes prior to the 6-week mark, because some of these were ready to go a long time ago. I've got a Snow Queen growing into an Adansonii, and then I had more heartleaf philodendron growing into, other plants. The peperomia, look at those aerial roots. Oh my goodness, this was definitely ready to be potted up as well, and we're getting rid of that tub because she needs a bath. So those melanochrysum stems are not looking good at all. I did end up binning those guys, and now I'm pulling out all of the Stanleyanas to check their root growth. Some do have better growth than others. I would say none of them are ready to be actually potted up yet though. Some of the leaves have melted because of the high humidity conditions. Like these prop boxes, they create their own rain basically. Their high humidity is so high. So that's not unusual, but I'm not worried. What I worry about is the stems of the plants. If they are rotting, that's when you're in trouble. If leaves are rotting, it's not that big of a deal, but you should remove them. As far as I'm concerned, these Stanleyanas need to go back into the tub. They are not ready to be potted up yet because they don't have a proper root system, or a root system that's big enough to support the plant. I also do reuse my perlite from prop boxes, So what I do when I'm sort of emptying out a prop box, I put all of my wet perlite in a bowl and I boil it later and I let it dry, and then I use that dried perlite to, you know, re-pot up cuttings and stuff like that, because, you know, you don't need to waste it. It can be sterilized and it can be reused. Okay, let's check out how this melanochrysum went. The root system is not great. It's not ideal. I would definitely like to try some different methods for propagating melanochrysum in the future. I found that most of my cuttings actually didn't do as well as I would want in the conditions in the prop box. So I do have some other things that I want to try in the future, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. I do know that melanochrysum doesn't have an issue with high humidity because they will grow aerial roots like an absolute boss when they're given the chance. But yeah, I think something else about the prop box, maybe they just don't like it. All right, let's check out this purple passion. This was probably ready to be potted up like 3 weeks ago, to be honest. It didn't need to be in the prop box for this long, but it's done well in the prop box. I was worried about like the humidity with this plant, but it seems to have actually loved it, and it's grown a nice little luscious plant there. I'm just going to remove the excess perlite. It is absolutely fine if perlite sticks to the roots. Don't go mad trying to remove it. It's going to offer aeration around those roots when you pot it up, which you want. That's exactly what you want out of a potting mix. You'll be able to see in my potting mix there is a lot of perlite. There's a lot of chunky bits, and that's great to prevent plants from getting soggy or getting root rot while they're in their pots. Okay, next up is the Alocasia zebrina. Now, I was super curious to see what the root system would look like. I expected it to be bigger based on having those 2 little pups, but look, it's fine. I looked at the root system and I thought, no, I can work with this. I'm going to put it in a self-watering pot and I'm going to get it out of those high humidity conditions. Based on my experience, alocasias really like semi-hydro. So I just have these tiny little self-watering pots that I picked up on Amazon. I'm using Mab Grow here, which is basically, it's rocks. It's literally rocks. It's an alternative to perlite. It's an alternative to leca. And I'm going to put that chunk in there, and I put it in my plant cabinet, and I can tell you right now, she's growing. She's happy. I made the right move moving this when I did. If I'd gotten to it any sooner, the root system probably wouldn't have been big enough to support itself. So yeah, I think perfect timing with this guy. This peperomia has also grown really well. It has a good root system, and it's been growing aerial roots all over it. So it looks a bit shabby and ugly with all those weird aerial roots. It looks like spider webs, but it's fine. I'll pot her up, she'll adjust, and I can tidy her up with a little clip once it is used to being in soil. Okay, it's time for the Snow Queen cuttings. This is my mother plant that I took the original cuttings off, and you can see she's established in there. She'll probably need a repot sometime during spring. But for now, I just want to get the babies in there. So the way that I do this is I loosen up the plant. I'm going to pull it out. I am totally comfortable reusing the soil. The soil is still good. The plant really hasn't been in there all that long. I don't remove all of the soil. I just loosen it up around the top, because the little baby plants are going to basically just sit around the base of the mother plant. So I'm just loosening up that soil. I'm making room to slip those little bulbs into the pot. With the tip cutting, it had grown so many aerial roots that I opted to actually cut it in half and turn it into 2 little cuttings and just pot them up, which was fine because they had a root system to support themselves. Then I just top it up with a little extra soil, and there we have a nice full plant. Now it is time for the heartleaf philodendron, which you can probably see looks pretty sad. So I did discover that there was actually 2 plants in there, but one of them had died, so I pulled that out. I think it might have been dead when I bought it, to be honest. And also the plug is still attached around this plant. Listen, I'm not anti-plug, but sometimes I don't like them, especially when they don't degrade. This plant is well over a year old, and for the plug to not have decomposed or degraded, it's got to go. It's got to go. So I pulled that off, trying not to damage the roots, and then I'm putting in the cuttings. So you'll be able to see that a lot of these cuttings have quite a long root system. It can be kind of difficult getting the roots in there, but just, patience, perseverance, and you will have a nice full plant to reward yourself with. All right, and there she is. It will need a shower, which I will do at a later stage. I'll take them all outside and hose them down, but not just yet. Not just yet. And the last little guys I have are some more Mandula cuttings and some Monstera Adansonii cuttings. The Adansonii cuttings haven't grown all that much with their root system, which doesn't surprise me. They are quite slow to root, but that's fine. The Snow Queen, I am trying to pot this up in that itty bitty pot, which is dumb. It's dumb. That pot is now too small for that root system. So I put it in a slightly wider pot, and I'm just going to acclimate it, make sure it's doing okay in soil, and then I'm going to ask a friend, do you want an itty bitty epipremnum Snow Queen? Yes? Good. Take this one, please. Thank you. The only plant that I am going to water is the Alocasia zebrina, and that is with the semi-hydro plant food. It needs water, definitely. It can't sit in rocks for too long. Well, it needs water straight away. The other ones I don't water for 24 hours. And the only reason that I choose to do that is because I've had a couple of situations where I've repotted or potted up cuttings or repotted plants and watered them straight away, and then somehow they get root rot. So I find that if if I let them sit for 24 hours and then water them, that doesn't happen. So that's just the method that I choose. I do still have some cuttings that need to continue to root, so I am putting them back in the clean box. Yeah, knock it over. Very good. That's not annoying at all. And I am again feeding them with that semi-hydro plant food. And I thought, as a bonus, I would show you my second prop box. This one's been going for quite a bit longer, and I got some little bebes in here, but I didn't want to have two prop boxes that were like half full, so I am consolidating stuff. I have Scindapsus pictus cuttings in there. There was a caladium that went dormant. I've got some alocasia bulbs. And while I wrap up this video, you can watch me pot up I believe it's a caladium. I'm not actually sure. It might not be. This went dormant, and I was sure that it was going to die, but no, put it in the prop box and it just went sick. So, anyway, I'm potting that up in a little semi-hydro setup. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you propagate plants at home as a little hobby, let me know what your preferred method is. I think the most common one is probably water, followed by sphagnum moss. But if you use a perlite method or another method, let me know. I'm very, very curious. Also, if you are a planty person, let me know what your favorite plant is. Let me know what your treasure plant is, and let me know what your biggest plant fail has been. I've had a few that come to mind, but they're a little bit painful, so I don't want to talk about them right now. All right, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.